A few weeks ago, we made this video here on the screen. Now, at the time, we were pretty much just replying to all the questions that we were getting about why we were running the shocks upside down on our 10th cars on carpet, along with many other people as well. Now, we didn't expect the video to gain the traction it gained. It has over 30,000 views, a number we thought we'd never reach. And it got noticed by this man, Joseph Quaggarine. Now, he's also known as JQ. He's the chief designer for Mayako and 8 Scale racing brand at the minute. And he also had his previous brand of cars before as well. So he definitely knows what he's talking about. So he replied to our video on his channel, JQ Racing TV. He had some really good ideas and things that we will try at the end of this video. We're going to go testing and try a few of the things he said. But first, we're going to sort of talk about carpet racing, talk about the environment that we're on, and then I'm going to reply to his video as well and the theories that he comes out with and whether I agree or disagree with what he's saying. So without further ado, let's get straight into it. To really understand what we're talking about and what we're analysing here, we need to understand the conditions that we're racing in because they're very strange. You don't see it anywhere else in motorsport. You don't ever see a track with almost zero bumps compared to how much suspension the cars have and this amount of traction. So it's a very unique scenario. So we're going to watch this video from two-wheel drive at MKGP, then we'll watch a little bit of four-wheel drive at MKGP. And the idea is we want to see what is limiting the cars from going faster because that's what we're all interested in, right? How do we go around the track faster? What is stopping that from happening? So I'm just going to start playing this video here so you can get a feel for what it's like. So we'll watch it for a little bit. Got Orlowski in the lead, Coelho was second, and I think it's Tommy in third. So you can see the level of traction that they've got here already, how flat the track is, the amount of corner speed that they're carrying. So I'm just going to talk about one of these corners in a second. And when we come around here, I'm going to pause it there. So we've got this hairpin. This hairpin is a good corner to analyse because you're coming into it fast and you want to leave it fast as well. So what is limiting the corner speed around this corner? So if you think about coming into the corner, this is for two-wheel drive at the minute. So if you think about coming into the corner with a two-wheel drive, normally the limit on carpet is probably steering. So the rear end's not going to come out. You've not got to worry about that. It's usually either steering or maybe traction roll that you'd be worried about would be the two things that are the issue into the corner. Now, it's not massively relevant to the video this, but coming out of the corner is where the really interesting stuff happens. So you've got to ask yourself, why can Michael and Bruno and Tommy here, why can they not accelerate earlier out of this corner? What is stopping them from accelerating in the middle of the corner? Well, obviously if they accelerated in the middle of the corner, they'd fly off the side of the track and kill one of the spectators. But what's stopping them from accelerating earlier? So usually the answer on carpet is that your car will just your car will push and you'll understeer wide. So when you accelerate, your car will you'll feel it sort of go back and then it just sort of goes in a straight line. So if we watch a little bit more here, you'll see that these drivers are the top drivers and they still have to wait until the car is almost straight until they can accelerate. So we'll see this here. See how they have to wait. So watch coming onto the straight. The car has to be straight almost until they can accelerate. The cause of this problem is the load transfer of the car. So we need to understand what load transfer is and how we can reduce that. Well, that's probably the main cause of the problem. We've tried every way of rectifying this trouble, and everyone has. We're running 0 degrees towing, super thick diff oils in the rear end, crazy camber change on the back, sort of opposite camber change to make it steer out of the corners, and still the same limiting factor is the forward drive coming out of the corners. So, and the cause of this, the main underlying cause of this is the weight transfer to the rear tyres when you accelerate. So you need to understand a little bit more about that. So load transfer, what is it and where does it come from? Well, when your car is just sat there statically, you have a load on all of the tyres. You've got load on the front tyres, load on the rear tyres. And where does that come from? Well, it comes from wherever the centre of mass is, sort of in the chassis. So you've got it maybe slightly nearer to the back, you're going to have 55% load on the rear, 45% front on the load, something like that on the tyres. So when does this change? This changes when you create a force. You actually create a moment between the force on the tyres and the centre of mass. So what happens? Let's think about accelerating, for example. When you accelerate, there's a force between your tyres and the track, and there's also the force of the centre of mass trying to resist that force. That mass does not want to accelerate. So what you actually have is you have a distance between the centre of mass and the force acting at the bottom of the tyre. That distance creates a moment which actually transfers the load to the back. So as you accelerate, that moment there will add load to the rear tyres, add force down to the track there, and it will take in, the reaction to that will be that a little bit of load comes off the front tyres. And that will be about equal. So the addition to the rear will be the removal from the front. Now, there is another cause of load transfer as well, which is the rotating forces, the reaction to the rotation of, say, the motor, the reaction of the rotation to the diffs in four-wheel drive. But that's not massively relevant to this video. For this video, the relevant part to know is that the amount of load transfer comes from this distance between the base of the tyre and the centre of mass. If you can lower that centre of mass slightly, you're going to reduce the weight transfer since you're creating a smaller moment there. So that's pretty much all you need to know about the load transfer for this video. So we're now going to apply this knowledge and what we know about load transfer to four-wheel drive at MKGP. We're going to do the same thing as two-wheel drive. Why can we not go faster around the corners? Why are we having to slow down? Why can we not brake later, accelerate earlier? What is stopping us from doing that? So if we have a little watch here, four-wheel drive at this meeting was so fast, it felt ridiculous. But in the lead, we've got Olowski again, and we've got Carup in second. So you can see the pace here these guys are going at. Now, four-wheel drive on this carpet, we had almost zero slip in the tyres. It was like ultimate traction. Like you weren't understeering, you weren't oversteering, no matter what you did. Your car just had, it felt like almost infinite traction. So, again, why are we having to slow down for the corners? So, again, if I pause it on this hairpin, I like this hairpin, then, okay, we'll do the same as two-wheel. We've got into the corner and out of the corner. What are the reasons that we can't go quicker? So, into the corner with four-wheel drive is a very different story than with two-wheel drive. So, four-wheel drive, I said, you've got as much steering as you want, or well, you can have as much steering as you want. Even if you don't, you could do. And you've got as much grip as you want. So why are you having to slow down? Well, again, you have to slow down mainly because of traction roll is the reason you have to slow down. So if you went quicker, you'd go into the corner and your car would probably just go over. So you're pretty much just driving on the limit of traction roll. Now, you can set your car up to have less steering so that it won't traction roll, but at the end of the day, you're still limited by traction roll because you've had to remove steering to stop the car from traction rolling. And again, what causes traction roll? Well, it's load transfer from the inside tyres to the outside tyres as you turn. So that's coming into the corner. Now, on the exit of the corner with four-wheel drive, we have a very different problem to what we have with two-wheel. So four-wheel drive, same question, why can Michael not accelerate where he is now on the corner? Why can't he accelerate there and just punch it? Well, if he did, he would probably diff out, or at least that's what I think we would experience, and what almost every car I watch and see has the same issue on carpet. It's just how it is. So if you accelerate too early, again, you've got infinite traction. The car's not going to step out, slide anything. It won't understeer in four-wheel drive, but it will diff out. So you lift the front inside tyre will go light, and that means it allows it to spin. And then depending on what diff oil you have, your car will do something different. If you have very light diff oil, your front tyre can kind of just spin up and sort of almost grow, and it just makes your car it doesn't drive anywhere, and it just like does the weirdest thing as well, and you just lose loads of time. And then if you have really thick diff oils, your car just hooks in, and because you've got that drive on the outside, it makes it just hook when that tyre goes light and pull in. So you have to drive pretty much to the limit of the diffing out on the exit of the corner with four-wheel drive. And again, what causes the diffing out? Well, it's the load coming off that inside front tyre and onto the rear that causes that tyre to spin up and grow and do that. So again, everyone has tried everything they can to fix this. So we're now going to look at all of the things that people are doing in carpet racing, the trends, what everyone is doing to minimise this load transfer, because clearly it's a huge problem, and it is causing all the problems, the reasons we have to slow down in four-wheel drive. Every single one of them is down to weight transfer. So if we could eliminate load transfer, then we'd be much faster. And you can't just fix this. You can't just fix this with harder springs or whatever. You could have basically no shocks, and you'd still have the deformation in the rear tyre. You would still have that super light front tyre and diff out. So you can't really fix it. You could make the rear end super stiff and the front soft, but then you'll be more limited on entry to the corner. You'll be better out the corner, but you're more limited on entry to the corner. So it's a compromise, all caused by weight transfer. Okay, so we're just going to have a look at some of these pictures from Raceway 1 who were there at the weekend, and you can just really see how the cars are acting around the track looking at these. It's really interesting. So this one, the first one, is of my car. So you can see, again, there was nothing before this corner. It's just a straight round corner, and you can see how low the cars are running to the ground. We were running a 10mm ride height at the weekend, You're just doing everything we can to get the car as low as possible. It's mad that it's actually worth having your car run along the ground, which is a terrible thing. It's actually worth having that happen, to have just even a slightly lower ride height. It just makes the car so much better to drive, and that's because of this weight transfer that we've been talking about. And we've got, there's manufacturers cutting their chassis, cutting corners off their chassis and stuff, purely so they can lower their ride height a tiny bit more, just so it doesn't rub the ground. And then manufacturers making completely different side guards that are curled up and things like this, just so you can get the car even lower by an extra mil, something like that. So if you go through, you can see all these cars are just running along the ground in this corner. And then this one's interesting. So you've got Kobovic in the front here. His is obviously leaning over, probably with the back wheel slightly off the floor as well, coming into this corner. But then if you actually look in the background, you can see this, I think it's Tommy's car here. You can see it, and he's nowhere near the pipe here. He's not touched the pipe, and you can see exactly this was happening out of this corner. This was happening out of this corner. If you just ripped it a little bit too much on the throttle, you just get that front wheel just lifts up, and that's when you start diffing out. That's what I'm saying. So you get the front wheel just off the ground, and you'll start diffing out, and you'll get the issues like that. So, and also then if you went past that point, if you then just carried on, you just flip off the track. So if you get past the diffing out, you just go like that, just flip. And now this is what I'm talking about into the corner. You're driving on the limit of traction roll. You've got basically infinite traction. So you've got Cavalieri here, and like I say, just the slightest bit over the limit, both wheels off the floor, and you can see really how that weight transfers and that's the reason he can't go quicker, because if he went quicker, he would just off the track. And then we can see coming out of the corners here again, we've got this is Paul Crompton coming out of the corner, and you can kind of see, but the interesting thing on this photo is just how low the wing is. And now we've got a lot of people doing this. You're running the wing as low as you can, again, just to lower the centre of gravity a tiny bit. Like our new car came out with a -2 wing mount, because obviously the engineers tried it for carpet, and they found that it made the car much better to have literally the wing 2mm lower on the back. Was a big enough benefit to make a new mould and make a new wing mount, to have it -2mm lower. So we've got that, and then it's the same with the shells. You know, we're getting shells that are so thin that they last like 3 big meetings like this. They'd last, and they're like 10 grams lighter than one that's 10 grams heavier. But you can, you know, it's the price is worth it. It's people are trying these and finding it better. It's worth it. You know, the weight transfer is just so important. Anything you can do to get rid of it, and like you can see here, there's Bruno. Again, front end on the ground, rear wheel in the air coming into the corners. This is what I'm talking about. And then, yeah, we've just got another car just super low to the ground here. And that's pretty much that. So, you know, it's just, we're doing anything we can here. Like you can see all these drivers are doing everything that they can to really just reduce the centre of gravity. I mean, there's people also, like a lot of people just run lower towers indoors. Like they get towers made that are like 2-3 mil lower, just to lower the shocks down that tiny bit, and that just gives them the same benefit of just, yep, the car stays flatter out the corners, I can accelerate earlier, I can turn harder. Just, it's literally the only reason a four-wheel can't go faster on carpet, or at this meeting at least, was because of weight transfer and the load transfer between the tyres. So yeah, that's just really hopefully shown you like what we're up against at the at this level on carpet, like the limiting factors of pace. So now we can move on to the next section. So now we're going to watch the main parts of JQ's video that we want to reply to. So there's quite a few sections like things he says, ideas, and I'm just going to reply to all the necessary bits to what he's saying. So to start with, I'm just going to play the video from here where he talks about the weight transfer. And we were just struggling with, like, when we accelerated out of the corners, it felt like all the weight was transferring back and we were just understeering a bit out of the corners.
Okay. This is when I knew I have to make this video. Later in the video, he also says this.
One of the big historical problems with four-wheel drive indoors is the weight transfer of them between on and off throttle. You see the cars with front wheels in the air and then back wheels in the air as they're braking. They've just got a lot of traction indoors and it can cause these problems with weight transfer.
I think it's a very common misconception that the movement of the car, so the car squatting on the rear, diving onto the front, rolling in corners, that is what is causing load transfer. Or that if you see a car that doesn't move a lot, it's not transferring as much load. If you see a car that's moving a lot, it's transferring a lot of load. And that's actually not true. It's almost the opposite. So suspension is not what causes load transfer. Suspension delays load transfer. And this is really important to understand if you want to understand how to adjust your car in different conditions. If you think about a go-kart doesn't have suspension, but it has load transfer. If you're familiar with invisible speed, I talk about initial versus overall grip. Initial grip is that instant load transfer. So you drive into a corner, you turn into the corner, and load wants to transfer onto the outside tires. If you don't have any suspension, that load transfer happens very quickly. The point of adjusting suspension is giving the driver and the tires time to react to a change. So when the suspension allows the car to roll, that's actually delaying that instant load transfer. So with softer suspension and more travel, allowing the car to move more, roll, dive, pitch more, you are delaying load transfer more. So a stiffer car has more initial grip and a softer car has more overall grip. That's how I like to explain it. So looking at how a car moves, you can determine where load is transferring, but just looking at it, you don't actually know the amount of load that's transferred. The more the chassis of the car is allowed to move, the longer it takes for load to transfer. Springs are what limit how far a chassis can move, and the damping determines how long that takes. But let's continue with the video now.
So, Okay, so what do I think of what JQ said here? Well, I completely agree with him. I agree with him in every way. So I'm not sure what he saw in our video that prompted him to say that, but I totally agree with him. So this is the issue that we're having. So we have too much load transfer. We've already established that. And pretty much what JQ is saying here is that that problem cannot necessarily be fixed with springs and you know, stiffening the car up doesn't fix the load transfer. We've already talked about where load transfer comes from and where it originates from. So we can't change the total load transfer of the car by adjusting the stiffness, because overall the load transfer, like we said, comes from the distance between the centre of mass and the tyres, as well as the rotating forces as well. So adjusting the stiffness of the springs or adjusting the stiffness of the damping, we can't really use that to fix the issue that we're having here, because overall we'll still have the same total weight transfer. We might be able to slow it down or speed it up. However, the problem that we have here, which we want to reduce, overall load transfer is what we want to reduce, can't really be fixed by stiffer springs, things like that. Okay, so now I've decided I'm just going to summarise the rest of his video here, because this video is getting quite long, and to watch him reacting to us and his reaction and all of that, as well as me summarise it, is going to be a little bit too long. But if you want to watch his video, then it's linked in the description, and also JQ Racing TV, Hall Brothers RC, Shocks Upside Down, something like that. That's what it's called. So what happens in his video for the rest of it? Well, he starts by watching us, he starts from where we left off, from watching us talk about the advantages and disadvantages of having the shocks upside down. So the advantages that we think are why it works is that there's a lower centre of gravity, reducing that load transfer we've been talking about, and also that there's a reduced momentum to the roll of the car. So the car, when it rolls one way, it's then easier for it to roll back the other way. Now, we think the big disadvantage is the increased unsprung weight, which a lot of people agree with. Now, I'm pretty sure that there are probably more small advantages and disadvantages out there, but I'm pretty sure that the problem can be simplified to these three here. I think if we just analyse these two advantages and this disadvantage, I think we'll get the right answer at the end of the day. These are the biggest effects. So, what does JQ make of our video? Well, and what we've said? Well, pretty much he thinks that the fact that this is working means that our car must be set incorrectly. So he thinks that these two advantages on the left are not as important as this disadvantage. So in theory, this should not be working. So the fact that it is means that there is something incorrect with our car. Now, how does he propose then, if this disadvantage is bigger than the advantage, how does he propose that the car is working? Why does he think that it works? Well, he thinks that the increased unsprung weight is affecting the damping and the rebound, and that this effect that the unsprung weight is having on the shocks and how the car moves in the corner, he believes that this is why we prefer it, even though we shouldn't. So what does he propose? He proposes that if we turn the shocks the correct way up again, and if we change the car to do the same things that the increased unsprung weight does without the unsprung weight, he believes that that will be even better. He thinks we'll be even faster if we do that. So here we can really see how like the RC engineers think about this. So in theory, he believes in his brain, in theory, that it should be worse. Engineering terms, this should be worse. But he has a reason for why it's better. So he wants to create that reason without the disadvantage here. Well, I'm actually pretty much exactly the opposite to this. With my engineering brain, I believe that these advantages are bigger than this disadvantage. So I believe that it's working simply because the advantages are bigger than the disadvantages. So that's pretty much the main disagreement there. So really, in order to work out whether it's worth it, so in order to work out if you have your car perfect, set up perfectly around both, which will be better? Shocks upside down or shocks the right way up? That comes down to this question. Which of these advantages and disadvantages are more important? Are the advantages more important than the disadvantage, or is the disadvantage more important than the advantage? And if we have the answer to that question, we have the answer to what baseline we should work around. Where should we start from? Because in engineering terms, that's the best baseline. That's most likely to give you lap time. So we're going to start off by pretty much analysing all of these in detail. And the first one is the increase in unsprung weight. So unsprung weight, the big negative that everybody is talking about. Well, we'll start off by talking about what it is. So unsprung weight is it's effectively the mass of the car which isn't controlled by the suspension. So it's, for example, the wheels, the hubs. That is not, those parts don't have suspension when you're going around the track. They feel all the bumps. This body, the chassis here in the middle, is isolated from the bumps and vibrations by the suspension. But this mass on the outside here, that's not isolated from the bumps and vibrations of the road. It feels all of them. So that is effectively what the unsprung weight is. Now, why is it so bad? Why do we really not want unsprung weight? What issues does it cause? Well, you want to keep your tyres in contact with the road as much as you can. Because the more that your tyre is in contact with the road, in simple terms, the more grip you have. Because the grip, the load on the tyre isn't changing like this. It's more stable. And that more stable load on the tyre increases the traction. Why does less unsprung weight cause that? Well, if you have more unsprung weight, effectively the wheel has more inertia and momentum. So imagine you're going over a ridge of road like this, almost like a wavy shape of road. Well, the wheel is less likely going to want to follow that, because as the wheel starts to go up, it won't want to come back down again. And as the wheel's going down, it won't want to come back up again. So the wheel's going to be more resistant to following the shape of the road. Imagine that wheel weighed 0 grams and it was controlled purely by the shock. It has no inertia. As you're going over a wavy bit of road, the spring would just keep that wheel exactly where it should be. But because it has a weight, like anything, it has a momentum. So as it's coming up, it's going to take a bit of time for it to want to come back down again. So that's why the more unsprung weight we have, the harder the wheel is to control over the shape of the ground. The less unsprung weight we have, the easier it is for the shock to keep the tyre in contact with the road. That's why it's really negative. And as JQ says in his video, there can be times where this would be a thing on carpet. So say you do hit a dot or something, it could cause the tyre to instead of the load just going into the suspension, it could cause the car to want to buck slightly more. So that's pretty much what the unsprung weight is, but we need to look deeper into this. We all know that turning the shocks over obviously increases the unsprung weight, because instead of just having the shaft and the piston attached to the arm, you have the whole body attached to the arm, full of oil. So how much unsprung weight do we think this actually adds? Well, you see the pictures, you see the shocks on the arm, and it looks like a big amount, but how do we know? So I've actually calculated how much unsprung weight this is. So I'll quickly run through the calculation, so all you bench racers out there can tell me where I've gone wrong. So to start with, I weighed just the whole shock itself with the spring cup on, and I'll just put that on the scales and weighed that. And then after that, I weighed the shaft and the eyelet at the bottom, as well as the piston. So the part that was already attached to the arm, I then weighed that part. What you can then do is minus that from the total weight of the shock, and that gives you the part that was attached to the tower previously. So then what you've got is you've got the weight of the part that was attached to the arm and the weight of the part that was attached to the tower. What you can do is minus the arm part from shock tower part to get the difference there. So what difference are you making by turning it over? And that difference came out to be the additional unspring weight for the rear. So this is the rear of a two-wheel drive, but I'm sure it's very similar on four-wheel drive as well. The additional unspring weight on the back was 4.75 grams. But that's not where it ends. You have the motion ratio of the arm. So that is the shock. The shock is not actually 100% unsprung weight when it's attached to the arm. It's if it was right on the inside, it would be 0, and if it was right at the outside, it would be 100%. But it's somewhere actually in the middle. So that distance was, I think it was 0.681 motion ratio from inside to outside, something like that. So when you times the difference by that, and then you can put the difference over the total unsprung weight. So I weighed a wheel on the scales. I propped the car up and I placed a wheel on the scales, disconnected the roll bar and everything just to make it fair, and I weighed a wheel on the scales. And then when I put the figure from the difference and times the motion ratio, I put that over the total unsprung weight that's already there, and then you times that by 100, and obviously that gives you a percentage. So I've got that percentage for the rear of the two-wheel drive and the front of the four-wheel drive. And for the rear of the two-wheel drive, the additional unsprung weight is just 5.36%. 5%. So that's 1.05 times what it already was. And for the front of the four-wheel drive, it's even less than that. It's 3.89%. It's tiny amounts of unsprung weight that we're talking here. So 5%. 3.89% for the front of a four-wheel drive. Those numbers may not mean anything to you, you know, they're just numbers out of the sky. How can you tell what that really means? Well, how many of you guys run aluminium hubs on the back of your car? You know, those shiny things, they look really cool. You put them on and, you know, they're instantly a second a lap purely because they look cooler. But what unsprung weight do you think they had? They had 6.32% unsprung weight. So no one minds running aluminium hubs. They are 6.3% extra unsprung weight. Turning the shocks over is 5.36%. So it's actually a bigger issue to unsprung weight to run aluminium hubs than it is to turn your shocks upside down. I'm sure that's similar across all cars because aluminium is always going to be the same amount heavier than plastic than on all cars. It gets more shocking than that. You wouldn't think that the foam in your tyre would make much of a difference to unsprung weight. But what do you think the difference is between a closed cell foam and an open cell foam? Well, again, the difference is 6.29%. It's about 1% more than turning your shocks over. So simply changing from an open cell foam to a closed cell foam in your tyre is a bigger difference than turning your shocks upside down to unsprung weight. It's seriously tiny margins we're talking here. If you run alley hubs on your car, I doubt you noticed much difference when you put them on. Like, you don't go, oh, my car's terrible on the jumps now when you put alley hubs on. It's just what it is. And you know, the last thing you'd think when changing foams in your tyres, the last thing you'd think is that, you know, oh, well, I'm increasing the unsprung weight. Well, it's a bigger difference than it is turning the shocks over. These numbers surprise me, to be honest. Like, this is quite surprising that it hardly adds any unsprung weight, even turning them over. Like, it's crazy. Okay, so what does turning the shocks over do to the centre of gravity? Well, obviously it's going to lower it a little bit, since the body part is heavier than the shaft. When you turn the shock over, you're gonna, you know, it's gonna reduce the height of that weight, so you're gonna lower the centre of gravity. Now, obviously, since we've talked about the load transfer earlier in the video, you probably already know what effect this has, lowering the centre of gravity. Is also going to reduce the load transfer that we've been talking about, since the distance between those two forces has been reduced. Now again, for this, I've done a couple of little calculations. I can't quite work out the exact percentage because I don't know where the centre of mass is already, but I can equate it to moving other things. So I'll take you through those calculations now. Okay, so what we're trying to get by doing this calculation is we're trying to get a mass times the distance that a mass moves, and that gives you a figure. And then you can use that figure to compare to other masses and their movement on the car to see sort of how effective turning the shocks over is compared to other things that you could maybe do to lower the weight on your car. So, you know, it was quite complicated to work out, and it took me a while to figure out how I could even do this. But the main premise of it is that you have the centre of mass of the shock body itself, and that moves by a distance. So you have the centre of mass of the shock body times the distance that it moves when you turn your shock over. You then have the centre of mass of your shock shaft, piston and eyelet assembly, and you have the distance that moves when you move that to the top. So what you need to do is you need to get the figure from the centre of mass moving of the shock body, and from that you need to minus the figure of the shock shaft moving upwards. Centre of mass there. So as I say, it's quite complicated, but when you then go through that and work it out, you can see what it compares to. So what do we think just on the rear of the two-wheel drive to start with? I figured out what that was for the rear of the two-wheel drive, and it's equivalent to effectively having a 20mm lower rear tower on your car. So like I was saying, people run like -2 towers, -4 towers, things like that indoors, and turning your shocks over is equivalent to -20mm tower on the back of your car. You know, that's really a long way lowering of the weight. And then you can think about the wing as well. As I say, a lot of people lower their wing, create lower wing mounts from indoors. So the distance turning the shocks over on the rear is equivalent to moving your entire wing and wing mount together. It's equivalent to lowering that 27mm weight wise. So that's just weight wise. There's probably aerodynamic effects as well, but like, you know, as I said, people lower their wings 2mm and find a difference. This is equivalent to moving the whole wing and the whole wing mount 27mm lower on the back, just in weight terms. And that I think is a massive effect. Now, I only worked it out for the rear of a two-wheel drive because I had to take the whole shock apart and everything. But for the front of the four-wheel drive, I sort of scaled this by the length of the shock so that I could, you know, it's a rough figure. It might not be exact, but it'll be very close to what the front of the four-wheel drive is. So pretty much to do that, when you add the effect together on the four-wheel drive of the front and rear, it's even crazier. So again, because the body is also smaller on the front, it's still equivalent to having a 20mm lower tower on the front and a 20mm lower tower on the back. So it's like having both shock towers lowered by 20mm weight-wise, which, you know, is just crazy to think about, the amount of weight that's saved there. And then if you want to think about the wing and wing mount again, like people are lowering, as I said, our new four-wheel drive came out with a -2 wing mount to help with weight transfer and things like that. Turning the shocks over on four-wheel drive is equivalent to having a 51mm lower wing and mount in weight terms. 51mm, you know, that's crazy. So the next advantage to talk about with turning the shocks over is a reduction in the momentum of the roll of the car. It just makes it a lot more reactive and quick to respond through chicanes and things like that. So what is it that actually changes here? Well, when the car rolls, obviously you've got a weight, and the weight is moving a distance, and that weight is moving at a speed as the car rolls. And the weight times the speed is going to equal the momentum of that roll of the car. So what that means is that once the car starts rolling one way, it's going to require a bit of time before it can then come back and roll the other way there. So what does turning the shocks over affect in this? Well, when you have the shock bodies attached up on the shock towers here, as the car rolls, obviously the shock bodies are moving quite a long way. There's quite a lot of movement there. So they're adding a lot of mass to that roll and adding a lot of momentum to the car rolling. So if you can then take that shock body and place it on the arm, which is hardly moving at all during the roll, you're reducing a lot the the inertia to the roll of the car. So it's easier for the car to go into a corner and roll this way and then suddenly change back and roll the other way. Say you're going through a chicane, the car can just react a lot quicker rather than almost feeling like it's stuck in the corner. It can just come out of that a lot faster. And since the shocks are so far from the axis of rotation of the car, which is the roll centre, since the shocks are so far from that, they actually make a very big difference as well. So when things are further from that axis of rotation, they're going to make an exponentially bigger difference to the polar moment of inertia, the roll moment there. So that's effectively what it is, what I'm talking about there. And how big of an effect is this? Well, I can't really work out the whole, roll, moment of inertia of the whole car. So, I don't really know calculation-wise, but we do think from doing the testing that we've done, we think that it is possibly the biggest effect. And I know some of this feel could come from a lower centre of gravity as well, this quickness through chicanes and things like that. But it does definitely feel like when your car rolls, it can just recover so fast, like in almost an odd way. And one of the biggest advantages we've noticed with turning the shocks over, one of the biggest sections on the track, is quick chicanes. Like, the car just feels so much easier to place through like quick chicanes. So that's what Tommy says actually is the main thing that he feels, and or one of the main things that he feels. So he thinks that it's possibly the biggest effect is this moment of inertia thing here. So now we know how important these advantages and disadvantages might be. We know the size of what they're changing, near enough. But how important are they for carpet racing? How much effect do they have on a car going around a carpet track? Well, let's start with the unsprung weight. Now, the thing with carpet is, as I've said, it's just so flat. There are literally no bumps almost. You've got features like just jumps with flat landings, but you don't have bumps as such. Compared to the travel of the suspension, there's like hardly any bumps. You can't even compare it to something like F1, something like that, because it's just so much bumpier in like F1 than even carpet is. There's just seriously no bumps. So what did I say about the unsprung weight? Why it was bad? I said it was bad because you get the inertia of the wheel over the bumps, which makes it harder to follow. It makes it harder for the wheel to follow the ground. Now, obviously, cornering on carpet and just driving on carpet, that effect isn't really prevalent. There's not the that there aren't bumps on the track, so kind of that effect is sort of negated. Really, it doesn't really matter for carpet racing. Now, obviously, you have the jumps and things as well with the unsprung weight, but every time we've tried it, and believe me, we've tried it quite a few times now. We've flipped the shocks over probably 10 times, and we've never ever noticed the difference on the jumps. We've tried it on lots of different tracks, 4-wheel drive, 2-wheel drive, and we just haven't noticed the difference. And I think a lot of that again has to do with when you're jumping, it's one motion. The wheel doesn't have to necessarily react. It just has to just make one jump and then land once. And I don't think that's such an issue with extra unsprung weight. Also, like JQ said in his video, there is the thing where, yeah, it will be slightly worse if you say catch a pipe or you're racing someone and you clip their wheel, something like that. But again, the amount of times that's actually going to make a difference to whether you crash or not is very small. It might be, say, like, I don't know, you might crash, you might have a 2% chance more likely of landing on your roof rather than sticking on your wheels. So I don't think it's worth tuning your car for that scenario. If you find it quick around the track, I think you should stick with it, even if there's a small, tiny chance that there's a chance you might end up on your roof when you would have ended up on your wheels. I think the amount of times that will happen is very small, so I wouldn't worry about that. So all in all, I really think for carpet racing, in my opinion, the unsprung weight really doesn't have much of a negative effect. Like I say, I know everything out there tells you that unsprung weight is very bad, and it is very bad, but for this specific scenario here, it's much less bad than it is in another scenario, which is say like a bumpy track where the wheel really has to react. So, and also obviously it was only very small as well, 4%, the same difference as changing from open cell to closed cell foams in your tyres. So to me, in my opinion, I would struggle to, I struggle to accept that difference in unsprung weight for carpet racing is going to be a very big disadvantage. I'd be surprised if you just added that unsprung weight to your car and removed the sprung weight again. I'd be very surprised if you noticed that difference. So there's the unsprung weight part. Now we've got the load transfer part. So obviously if you watch the first section of this video, you'll understand how important load transfer is on carpet already. So you probably know where this part's going. But like I said, with two-wheel drive, it's coming out of the corners really is where a reduction in load transfer is going to be vital, because as you're accelerating, the biggest issue on carpet is the car transfers load to the rear tyres, some comes off the front tyres, and the car tends to push for a while. So you've got a large on-power sweeper, you'll just find yourself almost pushing the whole way around there. So you want to, in total, reduce the load transfer. So it's vitally important. If you could keep just a bit more load on those front tyres, you'd be much faster around that corner. So that's two-wheel drive. And four-wheel drive, I think every reason almost that you can't go quicker is load transfer on high grip carpet. I think it's every reason. You've got the issue of traction roll into the corners, load transfer, and you've got the issue of diffing out or traction roll coming out of the corners, which is also caused by load transfer. So if you can reduce that, you're going to gain huge amounts of lap time. As I've said, people are lowering their wings by 2mm, noticing a difference. Lowering their shock towers 2mm and noticing a difference. And from the calculations we've done, turning the shocks over is equivalent to, say, what was it, a 50mm lowering of the wing and the wing mount, and equivalent to 20mm lower towers weight-wise. It's a huge difference. And on carpet, I believe that is really going to help you out. And, you know, it's not just belief. We've tried it multiple times, and that is what it does. That's the main benefit we notice, or one of the main benefits, is two-wheel drive on the exit of the corners. The front tyres it just feels like you just have more on-power steering. So you've got a long on-power sweeper, you just get more front end around that corner, which does show that it's working. And in four-wheel drive, we all tried it at EOS, and we just again found that the car just stayed a lot flatter. And just the tyres, it's the load on the tyres is the issue, like we're talking about. Not necessarily how flat the car stays that's the issue, it's the load on the tyres, because we've got this issue with diffing out, and then we've got the issue with flipping over as well. And we found that the diffing out was reduced and the car was less likely to flip over, which meant we could go much quicker. So I do believe, as I've already said, I believe that this benefit in load transfer is much greater than this disadvantage in unsprung weight for this scenario on carpet. Now, also, we have got the momentum of the roll thing that I talked about. And as I said, there's been two main benefits we've noticed with this. We've had the load transfer benefits that we've talked about, I've just talked about in the last bit. But then also this odd thing where the car's just way more agile through chicanes. Just feels way more manoeuvrable. And it seems almost much greater than just what the load transfer would do. And we think that that's where this is coming from. And again, applied to carpet, this is extremely important, because it's on carpet that you get super twisty layouts. You know, you just get chicane after chicane, and you just really need your car to go from leaning one way to leaning the other really quickly. You need it to be in whatever corner you're in at the same time. And like Tommy says, that he thinks this might be the main advantage, is just the way that your car just really keeps up with the section of track that it's on. It's always ready to go. You're never waiting for it to stop rolling. You just don't have to wait for the car as much with it. So I do think that for carpet racing, again, with the sort of layouts that these clubs put down, I think this is a super important effect. So all things considered, that's my little attempt to persuade you all that the advantages are bigger than the disadvantages. But now we're going to watch JQ's suggestions for what he thinks we could do with the shocks the right way up to make the car better. And then we're going to go and test them out and see what we think. So JQ, in his video, he proposes multiple things that we could try with the shocks the right way up that he believes, if they worked, would be better than having the shocks upside down. So what are we going to do? We're going to go to Midlands Raceway, and I'm going to get Tommy to drive the car because I think he'll be a lot less biased than me, being honest. Because, you know, originally when I came up with it, he also told me I was being an idiot. But then once it was faster, he didn't mind. So I think whatever's fastest, Tommy will be happy about. I don't think he'll, you know, I don't think he'll be very biased. He just wants the fastest car he can have. So we're going to do that. Now, what are the main things that he says that he thinks? Well, the main one that he says, if we try nothing else, he wants us to try, is extra rebound in the pistons. And that involves making some flaps that go underneath the piston to control the amount of rebound. Now this one it's quite tough to actually test in a fair way. The issue is that we're running 2-hole pistons, so we can't actually reduce rebound. We can only really increase compression in the hole sizes. So we're going to have to add a 3rd hole with a flap underneath it. So, and then maybe increase the oil to get the same feeling in compression and get a slightly stiffer rebound. So that's what we're going to do for the rear shocks there. Now also he suggests things like trying stiffer springs. Now we're already running like very stiff springs, like the stiffest ones we can find basically on the rear. So we kind of can't test that. We could try softer maybe. But also different shock oils and things he suggests trying, because it's all about the movement of the suspension. JQ thinks that the unsprung weight is affecting the movement of the suspension, slowing it down, and that is why we're preferring it. So it's all just tuning around the suspension at the back that we're going to try out, and we'll report back later in the video what we found. Okay, so we're back from Midlands, and what did we actually try? What did I get Tommy to try? So, as I said, JQ suggested a few things. He suggested rebound, shock oil, springs, things like that. We decided in the end, we didn't have much time, it's just an evening, that we'd try the rebound on the back of the 2-wheel drive and all 4 shocks in the 4-wheel drive. Because the thinking behind that is we've kind of, you know, we've tried over the whole winter series, we've had different springs, oil, all that, all the time, and still every time we've tried upside down shocks, it's been better. So we've kind of already proven that part. Also, everyone who's tried it with very different oils and springs as well, different setups, everyone who's tried it has always preferred it from what I've seen. So I think the oil and springs, we can kind of say it's probably not that. But the rebound, that's something that, as far as I'm aware, nobody's really tried. So that's an interesting one. But how did we change the rebound? What did we do? So, bit of context, our shocks in the back of the 2-wheel drive, we're currently running 2-hole 1.8 pistons, and the same in the 4-wheel drive as well. In the front of the 4-wheel drive, it's 2-hole 1.6. So what we did is we drilled a 3rd hole. We drilled a 1.2 hole, and we put a flap underneath the piston. Now the flap is like a really thin, clear sort of vinyl bit of plastic, and we have messed with them before, putting them on the top of the piston. So we've used these before. So, and from what I've seen, like when you sort of look down the shock, it looks like they just open almost straight away to the amount of oil that's coming through, or that can fit through, say like a 1.2 hole. They just open to that distance straight away. So you can move the shock really slow, and you see them just open. So pretty much what you drill the hole to is the flow that you're going to get in that direction. And when you're going up again, it closes off. That's if you have it on the top. But of course, we were putting it on the bottom this time because we wanted to reduce rebound like JQ suggested. So from what I've calculated, it should actually reduce compression by about 20%. So like I said, it doesn't affect rebound because we've added an extra hole that wasn't there. So the rebound is the same. We've actually added a bit of compression. So to counter that, we went thicker shock oil by 5 weight in the shocks. So what that should bring it to do is, because I was kind of, feeling both cars on the table with the 2 sets of shocks on. So the compression felt the same, but the rebound felt like it was reduced. So it felt like it was trying to pick the wheels up more as I lifted the car, but pushing down effectively felt the same. So I've got it as close as I can. Not exact science, but as close as I can get it. So how did we try this stuff out? What was the plan? So basically what we did is we started off with just the normal shocks that we run the right way up on both cars. Then we tried the reduced rebound shocks. We tried them on both cars, also the right way up. And whichever set of shocks we preferred, we then turned upside down to see if that still made the car better. So, for example, if we tried the four-wheel drive and we tried both sets of shocks and we prefer the reduced rebound, we then turn the reduced rebound upside down to see if that still makes the car better. Because remember, like JQ was saying, he believes that that's a better alternative to turning the shocks over. So effectively, turning the shocks over should make it worse if the rebound makes it better. So yeah, so now I'm going to hand over to Tommy and see what he has to say about what he found between the changes and what we did while we were at Midlands Raceway.
Okay, so I'm very impressed you made it this far into the video, to be fair, but I'm just going to quickly talk through what I felt with the cars through all the runs. So obviously the first run we did with the four-wheel drive. We ran the shocks the right way up with no funny pistons or anything like that, I think. So that's the first run, and the car was pretty dialed in, to be fair. It felt pretty good. So don't need to talk much about it though, because it's whatever. Second run, we put in the JQ pistons, and I'm going to say straight away, fair play, Mr. Quaggarine. I actually found quite an improvement. I'm going to draw on here on the track roughly where I found an improvement, and it's sort of in the major braking zones I found a difference. The car didn't sort of it didn't kick itself into the corner as much over the front end. It just stayed much flatter. So if you see here, the end of the straight, it's quite a heavy brake. I know it doesn't look like it because it makes the track look quite big here on this picture, but that's actually quite tight there at the end of the straight. Maybe slightly into this corner, little benefit, nothing crazy, and obviously here. But again, this is a heavy braking zone here, so into this left, the car just stayed a lot flatter. You had a lot more confidence just to fling the car in and just drive way more aggressively without anything trying to hit you off. So yeah, I'd say definitely in the four-wheel, them pistons with the flaps on there, 100% worked. Big fan. So the big question is, does that then still make it better if we put the shocks upside down? Is the car better again? So we tried that, and again, I found an improvement, but in a very different place. Where I found improvements with the pistons, I didn't really feel much difference having the shocks upside down. So where I found a major improvement with the shocks upside down was more on power. So like through the chicanes here. This corner especially, this left sweeper here. Before I was having a lot of trouble with diffing out on gas here. The car kind of stepped out at the back, and I keep flying off to the inside here like this because the car would keep booking out. So when the car was much more consistent, I could get on the gas much earlier around here and then hold the gas more and for longer all the way around this, much more consistent over this jump here. Also, slightly through the chicane, but it's very low speed chicane. Nothing really felt like it made a difference here. Again, this is a very high speed chicane, and this I did find quite a big improvement here also. And surprisingly enough, I actually found a little bit of an improvement on this jump having them upside down. I know it sounds pretty crazy, but I don't know if it's like a confidence thing or what. It might be, but I think again it's something to do with maybe with the roll. The car can recover quicker, so if you're more sort of leaning in when you hit the jump, your car's already, you don't have as much travel left in your shock, so it doesn't take as much to ping it this way again. So because it's, I guess, flatter, it just wants to just fly over nicer. Again, maybe though, slight negatives off the wall because that was quite an angle, but nothing crazy there. And maybe on the landing of this hop, small negatives, but nothing crazy. So let me clear this because I've absolutely scribbled everywhere on this. Okay, so another benefit I felt with the four-wheel drive, it's just the corner speed. You could just feel the car just feels faster. It just feels faster. So again, it's I think more of a slower speed thing actually, and well, higher and lower speed everywhere. It just feels like it carries more corner speed, most noticeably around this hairpin. Man, you just get to this corner and you could just turn. You just turn and the car just flicked through there. Absolutely lovely. Again, it's like through just every single corner. I mean, I can just draw around this whole track. It just feels faster. You can get on throttle earlier. You can get on throttle harder. You're just faster. At the end of the day, I just think it's just simply faster, and I think it's easier to drive, faster. I think it's a win-win. Okay, so the two-wheel drive, same thing as four-wheel drive. Start with the shocks the right way up, our normal pistons, brilliant. Car felt pretty dialed in, felt really good. So then did the same as four-wheel. We tried the JQ pistons, and to be honest, I didn't find any real benefits. If anything, in a couple spots, the car would kind of hook into the corner. So more like, again, this long corner here, the car would hook in initially around this part, but then out here I would wash quite a bit. The car felt like it would stick down maybe a little bit in the corner. Very, not really made a massive difference. I'm really nitpicking. This didn't make a massive difference, but overall I would say probably not a fan of the pistons in the two-wheel, but that might just be a personal preference thing. So then again, just like four-wheel, we went back to the other shocks because that's what we preferred, and then put them upside down. And it's the same story we've had for months now, really. The car, I'll say it for four-wheel because I don't think I emphasised it enough with the four-wheel, how much more consistent the car feels to drive with the shocks inverted. I find the car just, it feels, you can just get on gas way earlier out of a lot of corners. And again, I don't think I emphasised it enough, like through chicanes, like this big on power chicane here, it's night and day for me. And anything on power, the car just, it feels like you've just gained infinite aerodynamics. It feels like you've gained infinite aerodynamics. Your car just feels sucked to the floor. It feels so consistent. It just follows exactly where you're pointing it. The car flies through these parts of the tracks. You could just have much more confidence in the car driving through these parts of the track. So, honestly, with the two-wheel, I found no negatives on coming off the wall or this jump landing here. I found no negatives, and again, maybe small positives actually on this ramp here. So it's a very similar story to the four-wheel with the inverted shocks, just a much more consistent feel to the car. You can get on gas harder for longer through some of the corners without the car trying to diff out and fly off the inside here. The car is just a lot nicer to drive. This, I'm going to say though, maybe I'm just used to it at this point. I like the way it feels. I've driven it for, well, pretty much all winter. So I definitely have the feel for it. But I know a lot of other people have tried it and just much preferred it. I know a lot of people are starting to run it. So obviously it's not just me. There's a lot of other people as well. So yeah, this is what I found doing all these things. So thank you, JQ, for improving our four-wheel. Thank you for that, and I'll pass back to Jamie.
So that's it. You've made it to the end of the video. Some quick conclusions though. So what did we think? Well, overall, thank you, JQ. Our four-wheel drive is now better on carpet, so that's useful. We found the flaps made the car much better, but also we still preferred both cars with the shocks upside down. And I think the most interesting thing about what Tommy said is that the flaps and the shocks upside down worked in different places on the track. And I think that kind of shows that they're independent of one another. So, you know, I think that shows that the shocks upside down is having a different effect to what rebound is having on the car. So for us, I mean, we're not going to race indoors for a good 6 or so months now because we're racing outdoors. But when we come back in, we'll probably still be running the shocks upside down, I'm sure, unless something drastically changes. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the video. you know, it's been a good one to make. Quick thing, we're sorry that we haven't posted part 2 of the shocks video, which was going to be about the shocks setup, but we've been ill a bit, we've had big races, and we also just wanted to get this video out because, you know, it's an interesting one. It's not every day that Jake here watches your video and talks about what you've been doing, so we wanted to get this one out. We'll hopefully have it out within, I don't know, 2 or 3 weeks. We'll try as best as we can. But it is term end for me at uni, and Tommy's also got his A-levels coming up, so we'll try, but we'll try and get it as soon as we can. So, thanks very much, guys. Thank you a lot for watching this video. Comment what you think down below, create a bit more controversy, and we'll see you in the next one.